Yeah, guys, August 29th is strange. We have the Katrina anniversary. And then for those of us that lived in Southeast Louisiana, it's the same anniversary as Hurricane Isaac as well. In 2012, parts of Lake Pontchartrain out by Laplace and some of those areas southeast of Baton Rouge actually saw the worst flooding on record from Isaac on the same date. So it's, that time of the year that's really busy. Here, I'm going to share my screen real quick if it's possible. One of the big concerns is always getting into that area east of the Mississippi River levees in southeast Louisiana and also along the Mississippi coast. This is the hazard area likeliness index that we keep these updated. It's really kind of taking the storm conditions and converting them into impacts. It may maybe look a little bit busy. The blue lines here are just the cone of uncertainty, basically. And then let me try to minimize that. It basically takes the hazards for wind and water and just quantifies them with wind at the highest and then rain and then storm surge. This is the likeliness of substantial damage. And so this is as of I believe the 5 a.m. forecast this morning. So really from southwest Louisiana through the Mississippi coast, it was looking at possible substantial damage, which would be hurricane force winds at least 74 miles an hour. Rainfall for this map, we looked at the likeliness of 12 or more inches of rain. For several of these places here in southeast Louisiana, we were looking at a possible 12 or more inches of rain. And then storm surge, as Bill was mentioning, really there's that 7 to 11 foot peak storm surge level for parts of coastal Mississippi over through southeast Louisiana. This map here shows the likeliness that we'd have more than 9 feet of surge. We're saying possible for places like Grand Isle, possible over by Gulfport, Biloxi, but we're saying probable for the areas east of New Orleans and east of the Mississippi River over by Shell Beach, Louisiana, for example. What's really interesting, if we were to have a landfall in here by Grand Isle or over by Cocodrie, Homa, a lot of times actually the peak storm surge level will actually be east of the Mississippi River levees over here, over by Shell Beach, for example. I saw in Hurricane Ike, even though it made landfall in Texas, water levels were higher over by Shell Beach, over here at site number 17, than they were at Grand Isle, which is site number 16. There sometimes can be a bit of a storm surge shadow over here, over by Grand Isle of, blocking some of these, especially if you have really strong winds going from east to west. There can be a little bit of a reduction here in storm surge, but that said, where the eye wall makes landfall along the coast, if it's down by Grand Isle, Barataria Bay, you'll definitely see a localized peak there as well. So, but in general, as far as widespread surge, we kind of look here, the east of the Mississippi River, levees here in Louisiana, and then getting over here to the southwest coast of Mississippi by past Christiane, Bay St. Louis. Those are the areas where I think would expect to see the peak surge. Again, what was forecast around 7 to 11 feet looks pretty accurate to me. When you get over here more towards Biloxi and Pascagoula, water levels start to drop a bit. What we saw too in Lake Pontchartrain on the last forecast I saw was 4 to 6 feet of storm surge as well. And so this map is just the likeliness of substantial damage. And then this map is the likeliness of moderate damage, where we lower the wind threshold to 57 miles an hour. The reason we choose that, it appears that around 50 knots or 57 miles an hour, you start to see a lot of tree falls, a lot of power outages, a lot of more cosmetic damage to buildings like the siding and shingles coming off. But it seems like you get more of the structural damage right around hurricane force winds. On this map, it's the likeliness of 57 mile an hour winds, 8 inches of rain, and 6 feet of surge. And for this, we're saying a probable surge of at least 6 feet from, Grand Isle, Cocodrie, up through Shell Beach, and all the way over to Gulfport and Biloxi. One last thing I wanted to share, I was talking to you guys before about a project that we just did that was funded by the Northern Gulf of Mexico Sentinel Site Cooperative in partnership with Dauphin Island Sea Lab. And these are just a few of the maps. We did a 2-year project in Biloxi where we actually built their first comprehensive coastal flood history, and then a lot of building elevation mapping. This is the elevation for about 1,200 buildings in Biloxi. And you can see here about 17% of the buildings are less than 12 feet. And you can see where they are. Actually, on this map, Highway 90 is at the bottom. And actually, right down here, this would be the Beau Rivage. At the very bottom of the screen is the Gulf of Mexico. And at the top of the screen is Biloxi Bay. So actually, it's a little bit counterintuitive. As you go closer to the bay or farther from the beach, you actually are getting lower lying houses. And so, we were able to look at at building elevations in that project, as well as comparing those building elevations with, for example, Hurricane Katrina's inundation. We're not expecting anything like this. This was 23.79 feet of surge, and it was amazing. I mean, this is what Katrina flooded in Biloxi, and I think it came into 89% of the buildings had at least 4 feet of water in them. So just really interesting there to look at the flood history. A time series for flooding in Biloxi looks something like this, where we can see actually we have high water marks for 35 hurricanes and tropical storms since 1880. Katrina was the highest in 2005, Camille over here in 1969. I think with this storm, I mean, we might be, if the track stayed as we expected, most likely, I think we're looking at maybe a 6 to 7 foot surge in Biloxi, but again, that's very sensitive on the exact storm track. I was looking at the building elevations, and this is interesting because I think Biloxi, Gulfport, a lot of these cities may be similar. The building elevations really start around 8 feet. Also keep in mind, sea level is not at zero. On that system where we measure building elevation, sea level is around 0.6 feet. So as long as the storm surge, I think stays below 7 feet or so, I don't think we'll see a lot of buildings inundated along that part of coastal Mississippi. But it's very sensitive to storm surge in that part of the world. And, just something we're always concerned about. Obviously, Mississippi and that southeast part of Louisiana, very susceptible to big surges.
Fascinating. I like that graphic where you showed with the traffic light symbols on there. I hadn't seen that in a while. It came back to me just like that. So I think it's going to be useful for people to get a quick glance at what the risk is.
Yeah, and actually, I'll just bring that up one time because I had a lot of people inquiring from Texas this morning. And really, let me just explain that really quickly again. So this is looking at, for example, the likeliness of moderate damage. And so like today, we just upgraded, like city number 7 here is Port Arthur. So again, not really expecting the core of the hurricane winds, but, and this is based on the NHC wind probabilities. Port Arthur got more than a 10% chance of 50-knot winds. So, we changed that traffic light there at city number 7. That's wind speed at least 50 knots, 57 miles an hour. We upgraded that from unlikely, which is less than 10%, to possible this morning. And so just to explain how these traffic lights work, wind is at the highest part of the traffic light, rain is in the middle, surge is at the bottom, and this is your likeliness. If it's unlikely, it's less than 10%, possible is 10 to 50, probable is 50 to 90, and then likely is more than 90%. So, it was interesting looking at the substantial wind damage. I think Baton Rouge and New Orleans were both around 49%. So, we held them at possible this morning, but likely in the next advisory, we'll upgrade them from possible to probable. So it's just a way to help people understand likeliness of what they can expect in their location, and just really breaking down the hazards into wind, rain, and saltwater storm surge as well. So we'll just keep that updated through the storm, just giving people an idea of what's likely where they live.